Good morning, friends. A carotid Doppler study, I says, had become an integral part of a cardiologist as on today. As far as I know, lot many people, they often call me how to do it, how to interpret it. And when Dr. Khanna called me up, look, Rakesh, I want you to do a carotid workshop, I was really thinking how to do it really a workshop or rather a lecture. But I have tried to make it like a workshop to the best possible of my efforts. Let's see in next 25 to 30 minutes. Why carotid Doppler for cardiologists? I often quote this quote, without inspiration the best power of a mind remains dormant. There is fuel in us which needs to be ignited with sparks. Well, when we work in a cardiology section, we often get referrals for people who suffered from a CVA, from a neurology sections, to look for a cause of a atheroembolic stroke. And believe my words, our own paper which talks of in Indian population more than 48% of the population suffered with carotid stenosis, vis-a-vis only 3% in US or Europe. And majority of our populations who suffered with the CVA, atheroembolic, 48% of these with the carotid plaques, they were diabetics. So that's one reason we need to look at a carotids. Well, carotids is the only part. Apart from it, we look at a carotid invertible, various type of vascular Doppler we do in day-to-day practice. We look at an arteries of the various parts of our body. And this is one format which we use in our lab, and I would like you to have a look at this format, which is very, very important if you look at this format as. We look at the right common carotid artery, internal carotid artery, external and vertebral arteries. Take their velocity, both systolic and diastolic, and then take a ratio of both of them. Internal carotid versus common carotid artery, that's the most important thing, and do it on both the sides. And why, I'll come over a period of time. Now the question comes, what's the technique of doing a vascular Doppler or a carotid, to be very specific? All of us knows it's a very superficial vessel, so we need a very high frequency transducer, close to 10 to 12 megahertz. The depth is minimal, only few centimeters, and then is a long vessel, and we need to have a linear phase array transducer with a big footprint. How do we go? We go from longitudinal view, and let me show a couple of slides how do we really do it, but let me say how do we do it first. Start with longitudinal view with the transducer axis parallel to the axis of vessel. Keep your hand steady, swirl transducer side by side to bring the vessel in focus, trace the vessel distally by sliding the transducer along with the vessel. And the most important thing is the flow which we encounter is close to 60 to 70 centimeters per second. So we have to keep your Nyquist limit on the lower side. Do it first in a 2D, then with a color, and third axis which we say is a Doppler axis. Once we have done with the long axis, we always go and confirm in a short axis view. Third important thing is once we do a Doppler, we should be as parallel as possible with the blood flow. The sample volume should be at 60 degree along with the line of a blood flow, and then measure systolic and diastolic flow velocities. And that's where we are stuck, where is a live recorded workshop or live workshop. As per PNDT guidelines, we cannot conduct a workshop in any hotel, hospital, outside the purview of PNDT. So I have tried to make this a little live workshop. Look, this is what we do. We have a patient who's lying with his head towards you on a corner of a bed. You sit just along with the corner of the bed with his neck extending to one or the other side. If you are scanning on the right side, his neck is extended towards the left hand side. If you are scanning a left hand side, the neck is extended to the right hand side. And that's what position I've shot just yesterday before coming over here at 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. So trying to make it live workshop. These are the two frames. The things will start getting closer one by one. This is the guy who's lying down with his neck extending to the other side. I'm scanning the same thing in a longitudinal axis or a longitudinal scan, and look at my transducer's scanning position. And I call this as a longitudinal scan. Look, we have often recorded the mobile, which we get, especially when we do something good, and we start listening to the mobile immediately. And that's how we work. All of us, we work in a lab, doing not a duplex scanning, a quadruplex scanning. So this is a swirling movement. We move from caudal to cranial. Look at a common carotid artery. We move up till its bifurcation to look at external as well as internal carotid vessels. Look at the position. How do we do it? By keeping a transducer just along with the common carotid vessels. And look at the movements of a hand with this transducer. And look at the scan plane. We are swirling. Once we move this transducer up and down, we are looking for external and internal carotid artery from its bifurcation. Once we have done that, we move on to look at the same thing from caudal to cranial in a short axis view. And I'll come down in a couple of minutes, maybe 10 or 15. Why do we really look in a short axis view? Because we need to look at the clot or a plaque in both long as well as short axis views. Then comes the next part, which is very, very important. It's not only that we have to look for a common carotid, we have to look for internal and external carotid vessels. And how do we really look at the internal and external carotid vessel? I've tried to look at this format again. I'm almost a cranial part of a common carotid which bifurcates into internal and external vessels. And with swelling of this transducer in a longitudinal scan, we look for both external as well as external vessels, and which is categorically seen over here in both the sides. Moving on further, not only the carotid, we should always look for the vertebral arteries as well. Once I have done a common carotid, I tilt my transducers posteriorly so that I start looking towards a vertebral artery. Look at the position of my transducer in a longitudinal scan to look for a vertebral arteries. And that's how we look for common carotid, its bulb, its external and internal part, and then finally with the vertebral artery. And all of us knows about all this. The flow in vertebral arteries is in the same direction or antegrade flow as in a common carotid direction. And if it happens in a reverse direction, then immediately you come to know about it that you are dealing with what? Good morning syndrome. That's subclavian steal syndrome. So that was, I say, live recorded workshop. Of course, cannot do a live workshop, but at least I can do a live recorded workshop. Well, this is a way it looks like a common carotid artery. This is a stenotic vessel, and very surprising thing is majority of plaque, if they are present in an internal carotid vessel, they are present right at its origin from a common carotid artery, majority of time. And this is a bifurcation which talks about external carotid artery. Couple of gimmicks which a vendor sell to you. This is known as B flow, BF flow. At least if you really ask me, till date, I could not find any utility of all these gimmicks which are being provided by a vendor for selling a system. Here is a common carotid flow. Here is the Nyquist limit, which is 30 to 40 centimeters per second. We are in a longitudinal scan, and we can see definitely is a laminar kind of a flow which we are looking at. And once we measure this laminar kind of a flow, look at this color flow by laminar, by putting a sample volume which is right in the direction of the vessel and a flow with a 60-degree angle correction, we gets both systolic as well as end-diastolic velocities. Now the next question comes, how do the external look like? How do the internal look like? External vessels comes anteriorly, the internal goes a little posteriorly. External is smaller vessels, they always branch and they have a high resistance flow. Whereas the internal carotid artery, they are posteriorly placed, they do not branch and they are the low resistance flow. Somebody can ask me what is high and low resistance flow. Very important question. High resistance flow means they have a low diastolic velocities. Whereas low resistance flow, they have a high diastolic velocities. Then very important thing in our concept, I don't say alone for a Europe or a North America, but I feel intimal medial thickness is a very important concept for a preclinical atherosclerosis. In a country like ours, where more than 1/3 of our population suffers with diabetic as on today. And what is a surrogate marker for atherosclerosis, especially the coronary one? And we can look at this intimal medial thickness just before carotid bifurcation by longitudinal scan. And here is the average, that's mean, maximum and minimum. In one go, it will tell you what is the intimal medial thickness of this subset of population. Proliferation, increased thickness, all of you can realize what's the increased thickness for this patient in a common carotid artery. If you don't have a software, you can measure it directly as shown in this slide. And this is one example where IMT has significantly increased over here, but it not produce any significant stenosis. But if this is the intimal medial thickness, there is no stenosis, there is laminar flow, and if this is the internal medial thickness, presence of even an insignificant plaque, which will classify it as, is an independent risk factor for a coronary artery disease, so much so that more than 37% of the patients suffered with CAD within a period of 7 years, rather than increased intimal medial thickness. What is insignificant plaque? I showed you one example where it's, another one is seen classically over here. We could see another plaque which is present over here, but it's not producing any significant stenosis. Significant stenosis in terms of a carotid is 70% or more than that. Next comes the quality of a plaque. You look at the quality of plaque with this. The surface is not really smooth. It's a heterogeneous character. On top of that, there's a lot of calcium in this plaque. So it's not only a fibrous, fibrofatty, but it's calcified too. That's what the characteristic of the plaque is. We can measure both in long axis as well as short axis of these plaques whenever we measure. Here we measure the intimal medial thickness, which is more than 0.8, suggestive of significant lesion. Another one, the quality of plaque. The various kind of a plaque which is present. Sometimes we do not see a plaque, but we see a turbulence. And whenever we see a turbulence, we put a Doppler flow pattern and to look at the velocity. And here's the velocity is 195 centimeters versus 64 centimeters. Over a couple of slides, I'll show you what is the importance of this kind of a things. Plaques at origin, another one, the same characteristic, various kind of a plaque which I could show you today in my, and believe my words, all of these images are my own, not from anywhere downloaded or somewhere else. This is one artery which is a tortuous artery, which shows all kind of a things. If you can look at, this is internal carotid artery, which is almost tortuous to produce a two kind of a turbulence. And if this is kind of a things, you look at this velocity, the systolic velocity will always be high, but not only the diastolic velocity. It is here, it is 70. So we need to take three things. We take a systolic, we take a diastolic, and third is their ratios to come to a conclusion, the significance of a stenosis. So let me go to the examples, various of them. Another one with a large plaque which is present right at the bifurcation with extending into internal carotid artery. Why? I said a couple of minutes back. This is a data from the US, says that 50,000 strokes every year. And if we multiply our population with their population, at least is 5 times more than that, you can think how many strokes we have in the country. And on top of that, it says almost 1/3 to 1/2 of the population of these strokes, they suffered, if they are thromboembolic, they suffer from a carotid artery stenosis. If we have a carotid stenosis, which is less than 60%, we have an annual risk of a stroke is 8%. And if it's significant, that's 70% or more than that, almost double risk of recurrent and a further strokes. B-mode imaging, I showed you a couple of images. It tells you about a plaque morphology, ulceration, and how the echoluscence of these plaques are. Well, this is one paper in an era when a color Doppler was just introduced. We used to classify these plaques based on this paper in 1992, talking about three important parameters which still holds true: hemodynamic stenosis in diameter, morphology of a plaque, and the surface of that plaque. But the most important thing is, even if the morphology tells you only more than 70% of the lesion, obviously this is problematic. But if the plaque surface is irregular or ulcerated, whether it's less than 70 or more than 70, it does not make any difference. And that is a plaque which is at risk of producing an thromboembolic stroke. This is one paper I need to show it to you, published in JACE 2011, again relevant for our own country. If the mean intimal thickness is more than 0.8 millimeters in common carotid artery just before its bifurcation, it's an independent risk factor for a coronary artery disease. On top of that, if you find even a small, minor, tiny, minuscule plaque in an internal carotid artery, it is absolute indication that this is a guy who is at very high risk of a coronary artery syndrome. We talk of various morphology, we talk of various things looking at the plaque, but how do we really classify these plaques, which is a significant or insignificant? One, I talked to you about the morphology. Second thing is the Doppler flow pattern. This is various methods I'll show you which is being applied as on today, and then come to a consensus which is the best, and how do we really correlate with the angiographic finding and which is to be subjected for intervention. That's our basic preview of a workshop or carotid Doppler study talk today is. This is one study from Grant et al. In radiology. Look, this is a classification of all these plaques like 50, 60, 70, 80 or 90 or near occlusion. But one thing which makes a sense in all the studies is, if the velocity is more than 2 meters per second, that's a systolic, and a diastolic velocity is close to 100 centimeters per second, then we should start thinking these plaques, classifying them as significant versus non-significant for intervention process. This study shows 70% or more than that, systolic velocity internal carotid artery more than 230 centimeters per second, and diastolic as more than 100 centimeters per second. Another one, Radiology 2004, it talks the same thing. Look at the systolic flow velocity, which talks of almost more than 2 meters per second, and a diastolic flow velocity more than 100 meters per second. Another study, it again talks the same thing, more than 2 meters, more than 100 meters per second. And the last one, if I come to a gist of all this, if you have a systolic flow velocity of more than 2.5 meters per second, with a velocity ratio of internal carotid artery with CCA more than 4, possibly you are dealing with a significant carotid stenosis. I have not taken one more parameter, that's a diastolic flow velocity parameters. Before going to that, this is what ultrasound with the angiographic correlationship of this, whatever I said a couple of minutes back. 70 to 90% duplex stenosis, predicted NSAID degree of stenosis, and a confidence interval. Again classified to the same thing, more than 70 to 90 with this and over here in angiographic correlation. Only caution, we little overestimate than angiographic finding. For that also we have a certain reason. I'll come down to the reason in a couple of minutes. In duplex scanning, angiographic degree of stenosis tends to be overestimated. In differentiation of stenosis of less than 70%, only 45% agreement, whereas more than 70%, 96% of the agreement was observed. Positive and negative predictive value for identification of more than 70% of angiographic stenosis was 70 and 98% respectively with the use of more sensitive duplex ultrasound scanners. Take home message, excellent examination screening for a high-grade stenosis. It tends to lead a little overestimation of degree of stenosis. But however, the exclusion of 70 to 99% angiographic stenosis can be achieved with a very high sensitivity of almost 98%. That's the next thing I wanted to say. I said systolic velocity more than 2.5, ratio more than 4. How about diastolic? And this is what category slide says, that if your diastolic cutoff is more than 90 centimeters per second, take my words, you are dealing with a significant stenosis of more than 70% of a lesion, which needs definitely an intervention, provided it is extracranial. And this is very well said by this slide, an author working on this kind of a subject for many, many years. This is one lesion which is almost a tunnel-like lesion in internal carotid artery. Look at diastolic velocity. Diastolic velocity, if you happen to look, not seen on the screen, diastolic velocity is almost 2 meters per second for this patient. There is no way that stenosis is less than 70%. And as it is, you can look at it, this absolutely a tunnel kind of a flow which is seen, and the Doppler is 60 degree along with the flow of a stenotic blood flow. Next comes, what do we do with this kind of a subset of population? There is North American symptomatic NS trial, randomized trial of more than 2,000 patients with symptomatic internal carotid artery stenosis with Medicare or carotid endarterectomy. Patient had either a transient ischemic attack or a stroke within 4 months of enrollment, and 30 to 99% internal carotid artery stenosis. For patients who had more than 70% stenosis, endarterectomy reduced their risk of ipsilateral stroke from 26% to 9% over a period of 2 years. Mean to say that this is a subject of population who should be subjected to intervention. Next question comes, why we have some little disagreement. There are 3 kind of a groups who evaluate angiographically. One is the ESET, second is the North American, and third is a common carotid group. Problem lies where to measure and how to measure. If this is a lesion, one group says the same site measurement gives you an excellent correlation. The other group says if lesion is this much, you have to compare with the distal lesion. And the third group says if lesion is this much, you have to compare with the common carotid artery. We studied it over a period of time to come to consensus which is the best one. Comparing all 3 angiographic methods for grading of stenosis and examination of correlation between angiography and ultrasound, the commonest group which came out to be closer was a common carotids. The stenosis was graded according to European North American and common carotid, and all of this, the most common useful group came out to be common carotid. Mean to say that if I'm estimating my lesion in this particular fashion, which is depicted over here, we do it in a much better way. Then either this is first, then comes this, and this comes to the least. Sorry, this first, this second, and this comes on the least. Couple of more examples before I switch over to other things. Here is 80 to 99% stenosis internal carotid artery. Systolic flow velocity almost 234 and diastolic flow velocity is almost 73, 74 centimeters per second. Typically a tunnel-like lesion, we don't have to tell you, that is less than 70%. This is a lesion which needs to be really tackled for stopping a further stroke incidence. Number of times we evaluate for a complete blockade of internal carotid artery. Here is one example. Here is a common carotid artery, and once we switch on the colors, we see a colors over here. And when we extend to these colors, we can see a colors only going to external carotid artery, and there is no flow into the internal carotid artery. And we can see this picture over here. There is no only single vessel is seen, and the internal carotid artery is completely blocked. Of course, nothing can be done for this subset of populations. Same thing, RICA origin is absolutely blocked. We can only see external carotid artery. Very good example for an ulcerated plaque. Look in 2D morphology. The plaque looks like this. Once we switch on a colors, you can see a colors which are going into the base of a plaque. And whatever the stenosis is a material. This patient needs to be tackled with interventions. Mass at the carotid artery bifurcation. Here is stenosis as well as the mass which is present at the carotid artery bifurcation. Well, evaluation of vertebral artery is an important issue. If we do not have any significant stenosis in an internal carotid, common carotid or external carotid, we may have a vertebral artery stenosis. We look at the 6 segments of the vertebral artery right from its origin till it becomes intracranial. And the most common place where we look at the blockade is its origin from which artery? Subclavian artery from which it arises. And here is a classical example where the left vertebral artery which is arising from a subclavian artery is almost blocked. Again, a long lesion in the internal carotid artery producing a multiple level of a turbulence. Couple of things before I come down to a closer. Like we have to have some kind of a therapy. Look, everybody should not be subjected for intervention, and I always say that only an extracranial lesion should be subjected for intervention. That's one. And whenever we have an intracranial lesion, the systolic and diastolic flow velocity, they substantially come down. Couple of slides which talks about medical versus endarterectomy trials. And if I say in gist, look, in patient with coronary artery disease, intensive atorvastatin therapy, that's so-called a reversal trial, 80 milligram per day, results in regression of atherosclerotic plaque, which is associated with reduction of CRP levels. On the other hand, if you happen to give them a low dose, at least it arrests their further progressions. And this reversal trial, this is a paper which is from a reversal trial talking of if you use atorvastatin for more than 2 years, 80 milligrams per day, it significantly reverses atherosclerotic plaque. In fact, I have one patient which I scanned only yesterday. It showed a significant reversal, and that's what I was trying to load. I could not do it, Shamlal, last night. What is the recommendation for AHE for all this kind of a thing in asymptomatic patients? Let me read them out. Very important. In patients with recent TIA or ischemic stroke within last 6 months on ipsilateral severe stenosis, carotid endarterectomy is recommended by a surgeon with a perioperative mortality rate of less than 80%. That's class 1A indications. For patients with a TIA or ischemic stroke and ipsilateral moderate stenosis, it is recommended depending on the specific factors like age, genetic comorbidities, and severity of initial symptoms. And with the degree of stenosis, less than 50%, certainly we do not recommend them. Again, if surgery is recommended within 2 weeks rather than a delayed surgery is suggested. Amongst patients with symptomatic stenosis, more than 70% in whom stenosis is difficult to assess surgically, medical conditions are present that greatly increase the risk for surgery when other specific circumstances. What's all this is, I'm sure like Dr. Khanna must talk about all this in the time to come. They often use a carotid protection devices while doing stunt deployment and other things. In conclusion, I say carotid Doppler is very easy to perform, requires a trained hand and to develop hand and eye coordinations. Excellent images are provided of the vessel both in longitudinal and short axis view by transducer and very useful for day-to-day, especially in a patient who has stroke. And this has become a really an integral part of a cardioembolic stroke apart from other indications. And duplex scanning, I'd say not the duplex, the quadruplex scanning is a simple non-invasive method at bedside, provides great information about carotid lesions, that to whom to intervene. That's the most important thing. Lesion more than 70%, very high incidence of recurrent stroke. These lesions should be tackled by interventionalists. Ulcerated plaque, however small, minuscule, tiny, non-obstructive, non-stenotic, they should all be tackled with intervention. Thank you very much for your patience hearing. I'm open for not 4 minutes of a discussion.
Sir, when will you send a symptomatic patient after duplex scanning for an MR angiogram?
Whenever I'll see more than 70% lesion, I'm the first person to send him for MR angiogram. But the problem is, I said one important issue. We little overestimate. MR angiogram always little underestimated. And if you ask me when do I send, believe me, I never send a person for MR angiograms.
You directly send for?
Directly send for carotid angiograms. And if a person is admitted in my care, even I don't send for a carotid angiogram. I do it carotid angiogram then and there.
It's right that this is a very good screening tool. Once you screen by duplex, there is no need for CT angio or MR angio. You can directly send the patient for intervention if intervention is required.
That's what I say. If you spend time with the patient and if you have done a carotid scanning, I showed you so many slides from my own library. If you have a lesion, 3 things which are important: more than 2.5 meters foot velocity, ratio more than 4, and diastolic cutoff almost 90 centimeters. Take my word, this is a person who needs an intervention. Why MRI angiogram? Because once a person goes to MRI angiogram, he always underestimates it. And then the real controversy starts.
Why I ask this question is, in many of the institutions, they take the patient for carotid interventions just based on MR angiogram and CT findings.
I'll say in a different way. If I've got a single vessel disease, I'm an interventionist, I'll open it up. If I'm a surgeon, I'll operate it. Why subject a person for a MRI when I can provide you an excellent information by duplex scanning? And if MRI also says the same thing, then what's the need of an MRI at that particular moment?
Yeah, first investigation to be done
Only
is
thing is,
ultrasound.
I know I'm controversial. Only thing is, if you do not have a good Doppler study person. Not only that, if it's ulcerative plaque, how can an MRI say that? I showed, it's not only tell you about hemodynamic stenosis, ulcerative plaque, plaque morphology, intimal medial thickness. I showed two examples. IMT is 0.8 and if a small tiny plaque in a beginning of internal carotid artery. Look, something more is available. And that's too at a cost which is almost 1/4 as on today. Only thing which you need is an expertise. And the machine, which only costs you how much? Echo machine costs you 20 lakhs, MRI costs you 5 crores. So what's better? Say carotid. Duplex scanning is the best.
I would agree with you, Dr. Gupta, and quite often mostly we go ahead, once you've developed a rapport with your radiologist ultrasonographic, we go ahead with our interventions. Now my questions are, one is regarding the heterogeneous plaque. We have all seen as clinicians how dirty a heterogeneous plaque looks like and when you operate on them. But in your recommendations, that has not been factored in. So what could be the reason that the heterogeneity of the plaque is not factored into the recommendations? Number two, when and if we do an angio, we always ask for a 4-vessel view. So what would be the equivalent in duplex to a 4-vessel view? We would like to see the circle of Willis. So how do you give us some information regarding that?
Look at the two things. Let's come down to first question, heterogeneous plaque. Certainly, if it's a heterogeneous plaque, we should spend a lot of time on this. I showed you a couple of examples for the various kinds of plaques. I always classify them as fibrous, fibrofatty, and calcified. If it's a fibrous plaque alone, nothing has to be done. Even the stenosis is more than 70%. Fatty or fibrofatty obviously needs an intervention. If it's a calcified plaque with a heterogeneity, obviously needs an intervention. I hope that's answered your first question.
What about ulcerative plaque?
Ulcerative plaque always needs an intervention. Always. I have categorically said this word again and again. Howsoever tiny, small, minuscule, minute plaque it is, if it's ulcerated, if it's not producing any obstruction, it needs to be intervention.
Yeah, the question was, why is that not factored into the recommendations? That was the question.
I have absolutely no idea. I'll have to get back and see and then answer your answer again.
I'm sincerely apologizing for the interruption, Mr. Chairman. We have totally run out of time for the discussion part of this particular
Give me
presentation.
2 minutes time. You know, look, we are always running out of time. When we talk of a questions, we are running out of time. Because that is what is required, you know.
Fully understand.
I spent a lot of time. Let me answer their question. Next question is 4 vessels view. You know, look, I always say that we are not looking by carotids above or intracranials. We are looking at a carotid extracranials. And the recommendations is if a plaque is intracranial, we should not touch it. Because the guy who's on a medical therapy does better than a person who's had an intervention. So, you are looking for a effect that significant stenosis is present. How does it affect its brain supply or intracranial supply? Well, so many people, they do a intracranial Dopplers. At least I do not know how to do it. Certainly, it tells you which particular area is affected by a duplex scan. And that's what is intracranial.
Dr. Gupta, may I just have a quick, as a surgeon, I think what Dr. Bedi was speaking about, when we do a CT angio or advise a CT angio, if there is a bilateral lesion, we would like to have a quick assessment of the circle of Willis as to whether if we are planning a surgery, we need to do a shunt, because when we clamp the internal carotid, there might be a total shut off. And
I absolutely agree with you.
I think that's the main point, rather than an intracranial lesion. If there is a bilateral lesion, whether there is a crossover supply, which might maintain.
I do agree with that kind of a suggestion.
Before surgery, actually another investigation is required. For intervention, maybe after ultrasound you can send for intervention, and you can see at the time of intervention we can see the circle of Willis.
Sure.
For percutaneous intervention.
That's very true, sir. But again, when he is speaking of an ulcerated plaque, even minuscule ulcerated plaque, when you are thinking of intervention, despite your protection device and everything, those ulcerated plaques are the nearest plaque which can actually dislodge even at the very first cannulation of the common carotid. And that is a known effect, and it has been documented now.
Sure, I do agree.
And latest, there has been a cognitive function study which has actually shown, and those subset of patients, there is a 30% deterioration of cognitive function in the patients post-intervention from the ulcerated plaques.
Thank you, Dr. Rakesh, for very nice presentation of live recorded cases. Now I think the live cases are ready, so this session is to be closed.
Thank you very much, Chairman.